So today we've added a targeting sight system that you can shoot your basic shot, but if you hold the button, you can charge your weapon and target the enemies, and it will shoot a following missile that will hit them. So we'll go over quite a bit today. There's a lot of stuff to keep track of, so if something doesn't make sense, I probably forgot something, so let's just go ahead and get into it. So I'm going to start with how the player actually shoots. I've kind of skimmed over this before, but we're going to go into more details on what I'm doing now. So we have a couple signals. We're going to have a fire bullet signal that's going to be sent to the main game to actually add the bullet to the game. And then we're also going to have to update the sights depending on how long we've held the fire button, whether we're doing a charge shot or not. We're going to have a timer that's going to see if we've held the button long enough to be considered a charge shot. And then we're going to actually have two different types of bullets. Now the charged bullet, I literally just saved the same bullet. I probably could, again, do inherited scenes, but I didn't bother with that right now. I just saved it as another scene and changed its name, made it a little bit bigger and changed its color so I could see that it was actually working. And I'd want to add more to the charged bullet later with an explosion so it has a bigger AoE. But like I said, we have enough to go through this time without that. So going back to the player, we have a few states. We're going to have a charged shot, and we did ready to shoot last time. And then also if we have a target or not. So in the ready function, we're going to get the game, because like I said, we're going to send a signal to the main game to add the bullets into the game. We're going to get the heads-up display, and that's so we can send the signals to change the color of the sights. Now, in the process, we're going to get our input, and then if we are charged, and if we don't have a target yet, we will look for a target. That's what the check sights will be. So this is a little bit different than before. So basically, for my basic shot, it's going to be if I release the shoot button. If it's just released, then I will continue to shoot the little shots. If I hold down the shoot button, as soon as I press it, it starts a timer. And as soon as that timer goes off, it'll change the state to charged, and we will send a signal to the charged state. Now, I will get to the HUD in just a minute, but basically it has three different states. It can either be idle, charged, or target acquired. And we're going to be sending strings along with this signal to have the HUD script process it later. When you shoot, you stop the timer and you can start it over again without it getting confused on whether you're charged or not. So we're going to see if we're ready to shoot, and we'll start the gun timer to see. I don't know if that's really necessary in this game. I might actually take the gun timer out eventually. I might just allow you to shoot as fast as you can because, like I said, in this version, you have to release the shoot button, so the timer doesn't really make sense as much. That's more for games where you can hold down the shoot button and you don't want to shoot infinite amounts of bullets. But just the mechanics of this game kind of changed that. And we'll get the positions of where we're shooting from and the direction. And so if we have just a basic shot, we'll go down to the else. If it's not charged, we will fire a bullet with the direction, or with the position and the direction and just a basic bullet. And I do that for both the right and the left, which I set up here. Now if it's a charged shot, I'm also going to send along a target, which I'll show you in just a minute on the other end of this signal, that it's a little bit awkward for me to have a signal that has a different amount of arguments in it, but you can do that. I don't want the basic bullet to have a target. I only want it to be a following missile if I charge the shot. So we will emit those signals with that extra target, turn charge to false, and we will set the target back to null. We will also set the sights back to idle so they turn green again. Now how we get that target, like I was talking about, so we're going to get the input, And then if we are charged, we will check the sights. So the sights are just a simple ray cast that shoots straight out of the ship. And I might actually add a few more ray casts to make a little bit bigger of an area that I could hit. But for right now, it's just going to be one single ray cast. And the target is going to be the collider. So if it actually hits something, we will get what it collided with, and we will emit the signal to update the state or the color basically of the sights, and we will also again send along another variable so we know what it should target on. So if you remember, when you charge, it starts a little animation here, but it still follows the ship. But as soon as you lock on to something, it follows where the far sight is going to follow where the target actually is. So that's all for this. I guess technically the gun timeout, like I said, for the ready to shoot is there. So first we're going to go over how we actually add the bullet to the scene. So we have a function here that is the other side of the shoot signal. So we're going to emit the fire bullet signal with these variables, and those will be going to, so we connected it to the game node to this fire bullet with an underscore in front of it. And what that does is it takes the origin, the direction, the bullet, and the target if it has one. If you don't put a variable here, it'll just fill it with null. So we're going to have a variable for our bullet instance. We're going to take the bullet that's sent along, whether it's a charged, or even I also use the enemies to shoot in the same function. So, but in this instance, it'll just be the basic bullet or the charged bullet. We'll make an instance. If there is a target, we will set that instance target to the target that's sent along. So, and then we're going to just set it in the right direction and in the right place, and we will add it to the container. Now, the reason why this a.target works is if you look at my charged bullet script, I have a variable called target, and it is set to null, and I change that with this a.target is equal to target. So that's how I'm setting directly what this will be. And this is one of the few times that I'm actually okay with directly setting a variable in a different script because you are making it right here. You still have to be pretty careful with directly setting up variables in another script, but like I said, we're kind of building the bullet right here. So I feel like it's not quite as taboo. So again, this is a following missile. So we're going to have to aim in the right direction, and then we're going to just move forward. Now, one of the most important things that you'll get from this video is instance valid? So the reason why you have to do this is it's just a safeguard against, let's say you shoot a following missile at a target, and then after you shoot that target, before it can hit the target, something else kills it. And then it's trying to find the global transform origin of that target, and the target's gone. So then it crashes because it doesn't know what this is, because the target is nil, or it's just gone. And so we're going to check to see if the target is valid before we try to actually look at it. And like I said, that's just a safeguard. Whenever you use following missiles against enemies, if you notice a lot of tutorials, even in 2D, this is very useful, but a lot of tutorials that show following missiles, it's just against the player, and the game ends if the player dies, so it doesn't really matter. But when you're shooting against enemies and they can die while missiles are still following them, it's very important that you check to see if it's still valid. Check to see if that enemy that the missile is following is still valid. This will save you a lot of time. So this is very similar to the enemies that we've done before, so I'm not going to go over this too much. It's just getting what you want the missile to look at, and then we're going to use quaternions to slurp to it, and it was going to be a pretty quick turning, because I don't want to have missiles really miss once you charge. That's not really the point of the charged shot in StarFox, so it'll turn very quickly towards the enemy. And the timer is just so it doesn't go on forever, and this is if it hits something, it'll actually kill it. And this will be coming back to later when we add explosions and just points and everything that goes along with actually hitting enemies. So the player will also be sending signals to the HUD, like we were talking about, to show what colors and what state the sites are in. But we're also going to have the main game give the position of where they're supposed to be. And this will make more sense once you look at the node structure that I have. So the HUD is actually a separate canvas layer that I put to about layer 10, just so I know that it's in front of everything. And these are just two sprites. I'll put links to these sprites. I just quickly made them in Krita anyway, but I'll put links so you don't have to worry about it. And then there's an animation here to just bring it to life a little bit more. But these are actually the same texture. The near one is not scaled at all, but the far one is just scaled down so it kind of fits inside and looks like it's kind of the same site. And that's what we're actually going to be using with the animation to kind of make it pulse, and also the rotation degrees, which I'll get to in just a second. Another small tip is it looks a little bit better if you put the site, the far site, above the near site in the scene tree. That way it renders behind the near one. You can do that with the Z index, but you also can just make sure you have them in this order. So in the animation player, I have 3 different animations. Idle is just saving where the scale and the rotation are at the beginning. Just do that one first. And like always, you just do animations by clicking the little keys. So you just click these to set those. The charged version is going to keep the rotation degrees at 0. It's important for you to set that in case you go from the target acquired quickly to the charged state. Otherwise, you could end up with a crooked site. And then the scale is actually going to start at 1, and then I believe the second keyframe is 1.2. And so when you play it, oh, also this one loops. But when you play it, you get this pulsating back and forth. Now the colors aren't right, but that's set in the code, which I'll show you in just a second. And then the last one is the target acquired. Now it's important that you don't loop this one. And the scale, I set it back down to about 0.8 on both the X and the Y. So it'll be 0.8. And then these, I just did one full rotation. I started at 0 for the rotation degrees, then we go up to 180, and then I went to 360. And like I said, as long as if you have this loop on, it'll just keep spinning forever. But now it just does one quick little rotation, and it will lock on to what you're pointing at, or what you're going to be shooting at. So the HUD actually has a script of its own. And we're going to get a reference to the near site and the far site, and also the animation player. Now we're also going to grab the camera, because we're going to need to grab some more information from that. We will set the current state to idle, and we will get the camera node going back to here. Where we're getting the information is from the camera. I should also explain that a little bit more, I guess, when we send that information. We're talking to the camera to find out where in the viewport the site is. And so if you remember in the player, I had these sites set out way up here, And I'll probably change these from a mesh to just a 3D position. When you play the game, you can refer to this camera that's active and find the 2D grid space in the viewport where the sights are, or where anything is, really. And so then I use that, the unprojected position, or I use the position of that sight, and I pass that along to the heads-up display, and I pass that information to the HUD, and I set their position on that canvas layer. So the first sight that's closer to the ship never actually changes, so I can just always set that to 1. But if I actually have a target and it's acquired, I want to move the position, again, talking to the camera. I'm going to get the unprojected position of the target that I'm focusing on, and we'll set the position of the sight to that spot. Otherwise, we're just going to set it to wherever that far sight is that's moving around in front of the ship. So going back to the states, so this takes care of the position of the sights, and it's mostly taken from the game node, specifically the camera. The camera has all the information of where the sights should be. And this is the state of the sights, and that has to do with what animation is playing and what color they are. So again, if we look at the player, when we update the state, we send the state, and only if the target is acquired, we'll send the target. So that's why I have the state, and then if there is a target, it will use this variable. If it's not, then it's just always going to be null, and we don't have to worry about it. So we'll set the target, and then we'll set the state, and then we'll match the state to either idle charged or target acquired, and we'll set the modulate to the proper color. When you see the PNG files for the sites, you'll notice that they're pretty much white. They're very gray, just so you can kind of see them. And we're just going to modulate them to the proper color. And these are just variables that I set at the top. And the reason why I came up with these ridiculous numbers are when you go here to the visibility and click here, you get this number, but you also can click the button right here, and you can just copy and paste after you pick which color you want. That's a handy little tool. Also, this down here, if you pick out a color and you want to save it for later, that's what this little plus sign is. But I prefer to use the color with 3 variables, the vector 3, than the hex version. I don't really know what these numbers mean. I don't really have those memorized. I have a better idea what the RGB is. So that's why in the script they're kind of ridiculous numbers. You can shorten them up pretty easily if you don't like having such long numbers. But we will modulate to each of those colors that we need, and then we will play the animation. Now, it's important that you check to see if the current animation is target acquired, because if you just use this line and not this if, or this check here, then it might continually spin because it restarts the animation over and over again. So I hope you like this sights and targeting system. If you have any questions, just leave a comment. Like I said, there was a lot of stuff and it was kind of all over the place. A lot of my code probably still needs to be refactored, like that little glitch there. I'm not saying that this is perfect code yet. We have a long way to go, but I think this is a good start to make a basic targeting system.